Alrighty, hi everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. We'll kick it off with the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative video, and then we'll jump into some introductions.
The Mississippi River flows over 2,000 miles through the heartland of America, from its headwaters in Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. This river is the watershed for 32 states, and we are impacting it with our actions. The litter that we produce from coffee cups to masks or plastic bags can end up in the environment, making their way to our rivers and then into the oceans. Globally, this results in about a dump truck's worth of plastic entering our ocean every minute. The Mississippi River drains 40% of the continental United States, creating a conduit for our litter to reach the Gulf of Mexico. In September 2018, the mayors of the Mississippi River made a commitment to reduce plastic waste in the Mississippi River Valley. To support that commitment, the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative is working with volunteer citizen scientists, local communities, associations, and researchers to collect data to understand the magnitude of the plastics problem along the Mississippi River. Scientists need data on what's ending up in the environment so that we can use that information to address this important environmental problem. And you can be a part of the solution. Download the free Marine Debris Tracker app and choose the list entitled MRCTI to collect data on what plastic pollution looks like in your community. The data will be analyzed to help us understand the problem, which then leads to solutions that will help policymakers, businesses, and citizens alike take action. Join us today to ensure a clean river and clean seas for all.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenna Jambeck. I'm a professor of environmental engineering at the University of Georgia and a National Geographic Fellow. Welcome to the first training webinar for the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative. This initiative is led by the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, the mayors along many of the communities and cities along the Mississippi River, the United Nations Environment Program North America office in partnership with the National Geographic Society and us here at the University of Georgia. We're working with you, community members along the Mississippi River, to generate a snapshot of plastic pollution along the river. You play a very important role in this initiative as collaborators using a tool, a mobile app, to collect this data. To give you more information on that tool, we're going to hear from Catherine Youngblood, who is a research engineer here at the University of Georgia and the Director of Citizen Science for Debris Tracker. Just a quick point of logistics. If you have questions as Catherine is speaking, please put them in to the Q&A box. We will be able to answer them potentially while she's speaking, or we will take questions after she's done some questions live as well. So I think you can take it away, Catherine.
Alrighty, hi everybody. Thank you all for being here today. We'll go ahead and get started here. All right, so as Jenna said, I'm a research engineer at the University of Georgia and the Citizen Science Director for Marine Debris Tracker. So Marine Debris Tracker is an app used to collect geospatial data on plastic pollution, and it was originally developed back in 2010 in partnership with NOAA and the University of Georgia. And we're now supported by Morgan Stanley in partnership with National Geographic. So I'm going to go through a couple of different things in this presentation here today. What is Debris Tracker, how to use the app, some strategies for data collection, and then some suggested surveying protocols. But before we jump into that, I wanted to make sure everybody is aware that all of this information is available in our field guide at debristracker.org/Mississippi. So first, let's talk a little bit more about what Debris Tracker is. So as I mentioned, the app is used to collect geospatial data on litter. So that's point-specific data looking exactly at where litter is in all places around the world, with the goal of creating a bigger picture of plastic pollution and really to be able to use that data to move towards solutions. And we've made a little bit of progress towards that goal of a bigger picture of plastic pollution. Thus far, we have over 3 million items logged in over 90 countries around the world. So it's really quite a bit of data. However, a lot of that data has really been focused on the coast. So this data collection along the Mississippi River is a really exciting opportunity to look at data upstream, look at plastic pollution upstream, where it's originating in our communities and how it's moving down the river to the ocean. As I mentioned, all of that data is also open data. So that's a really important value of the app, is that we believe we can create better solutions by sharing that data. So all data that's logged on the app is publicly available and accessible on our data platform. So you can explore your own data as well as data from other citizen scientists for anything from research to education to developing policy. And the goal with collecting this geospatial data, so you can see some example transects here of what that data might look like, is really to understand these 3 big questions. What is it? How did it get here? And together, what can we do about it? So let's jump right into how to use the app. So for those of you who have used Debris Tracker before and have it downloaded on your phone, you might notice that this looks a little different. So we're actually launching a brand new version of the app just in time for this initiative. So you guys are getting kind of the first public sneak peek preview of what that will look like. So let me go ahead and play my screen recording here. So basically, when you're ready to start, you'll click select an organization. We host lots of different custom organizations, and we've created one for MRCTI. You can click the info icon to see who the top trackers along the Mississippi River are right now. When you're ready, you click continue, and you'll see that list of litter items popped up. This is a list that we're customizing for the Mississippi River. So this will be changing as we get some feedback from more organizations on what items they're commonly seeing. But you can search for items, and when you're ready to click add, you can, when you're ready to submit that item, when you're ready to log it, you click add. If you don't have good GPS signal, you'll see this little box pop up and it'll tell you it's waiting for better signal before it logs that item. I was doing this in my house, so you'll see quite a few lags in the GPS here, but typically it works pretty quickly. You can also add a description to the item. So if you click the icon of the item, it'll pop up with that description box, which is where we're asking people to log brand data if they can identify the brand of the litter item that they're logging. You'll see I also changed the number here, so you can use those plus and minus arrows to change the number. You can also click in the box and type in a number. For example, if you're seeing a bunch of cigarette butts, you can type in however many that is. If you see a litter item that's not on the list, you can also use that description box to type in what that litter item is. So if it's something that we didn't think to put on the list or that's not very common, you can use that description box to add other items so that we're also recording those in the database. I'll let that go. Alrighty, so after you're done logging, you can click this Manage Items button, and you'll see it pop up with a map of where you've collected data. If you want to delete items, if you log something accidentally, you can click that X to get rid of it, and then when you're ready, you can click Continue. There's also a settings feature where you can change some of the features, like if you're logging in miles or kilometers. But when you're done with that, you can go ahead and click continue, and that will take you to the survey, which will ask you if you followed a sampling protocol, how long you spent tracking, if you picked up the litter you logged or not, so we can keep track of kind of flux in what's accumulating over time, what land use the surrounding area is, and several other questions. We also have a couple of questions about that basically give you an opportunity to give your observations of what you saw. So anything interesting or any kind of observations you want to share. And then finally, when you're done, you can also add photos to your log. So You can associate some photos with your log as well, so that we also have, so if you want to take photos of common litter items or of anything unique you see. And then finally, you can upload your session. So uploading your session will submit it to our database so that it's publicly accessible. If you don't have self-service for some reason, you can click that upload later and it will save it for you to upload later. And so when you're done with all that, you can then see that session on your home screen of the app. So you'll be able to see what you've recently tracked. So that is really the main idea. So it's not anything revolutionary or complicated. It's just clicking buttons and logging what litter items you see, but it's generating really powerful scientific data on what plastic pollution looks like in different parts of the world. So a couple notes on settings to make sure that the app is working right. First, make sure you're allowing the location while you're using the app, and make sure you're also, if you want to submit photos, make sure you're also allowing the app to access photos. I also recommend turning on your precise location mode. I believe in Android, this is called high accuracy mode. And this allows the app to get really specific data, so you won't have as much error in the GPS points. And then this is another feature I wanted to flag. You probably saw this when I popped up the settings and the screen recording, but this is a new feature in the app called a project. So in addition to these customized lists that we host for different organizations that allow customized litter items based on what people are finding in their area, we've also created this feature called projects, which is just another way to aggregate data. So it doesn't have a custom list of litter items, but you can associate data within a list with a specific project. So this might be, you know, a project for a particular cleanup, or a project for a particular NGO that's tracking on the list, or, you know, even a school. So you can change the icon, you can add a project name and description, and then users can find that project and associate their data with your project. So in addition to being logged under the MRCTI list, they'll also be associated with your specific project. The default you'll see there is to just be associated with the overall MRCTI project, but this is a flexible feature that we're allowing people to aggregate data in different ways. Alrighty, so let's jump over to data collection. So there are a couple different ways to collect data with the app. The first, and kind of the gold standard of data collection, is real-time geospatial data. So that means logging litter where you see it, so that we get that really specific, point-specific data of where that litter is. There are a couple ways to accomplish this if you're trying to log and clean up at the same time, which can be difficult. So one we recommend is just tracking in pairs. So having one person who's in charge of cleaning up and one person who's in charge of logging that litter. We've also heard suggestions from some organizations that they might record all of the litter in one particular area and then have volunteers go through and do a cleanup. However, if you can't, for whatever reason, track while you're cleaning up, you can also collect everything and then log it all on location. But again, because the app is logging your real-time location, you want to make sure that you're tracking in an area that's close to where you collected all of that data if you're going to use the app. However, we also have this option for a manual data upload on our website. So if you're logging data offsite, if you've collected everything, taken it back to a different place to sort it, and you want to make sure the location is accurate, this is the way to do that, is to do that on our website. And I'm going to flip over to our website quickly so that I can show you guys what that looks like. All right. So when you're logged into the app, you'll see this button for manually upload data. You can go in here and select the MRCTI list, and we'll move forward with that. And then you just add items the same way you do in the app. And after you click add, you'll see it show up in your list here. So very similar to the app, except that instead of recording your live location, you can search for the location where you are. and then record what that location is. You can also name the cleanup. If you're recording it after the fact, you can also you can backdate data as well. Alrighty, let me flip back to my PowerPoint. All right, a couple of general guidelines for tracking litter to go over. Again, this is all in the field guide, but I wanted to review it here as well. First being that items, we're asking you to record items that are 1 inch in diameter or larger. So we're not looking at macroplastics, not looking at really tiny pieces. If an item is fragmented, so if there's a piece of a chip wrapper, for example, and you can tell what it was, log it as its original item, because that helps us identify what products are the sources of litter. So a piece of a chip wrapper you could log as a plastic food wrapper rather than a plastic fragment. And then we already talked about brands and how to log other items, as well as the survey that's at the end. And then again, we also encourage you to share stuff on social media and tag us at Debris Tracker. Alrighty, so now let's talk a little bit about some surveying protocols that we can use in the field in collecting this data along the Mississippi River. And before we really get into this, I want to emphasize that all data collected in the basin is really valuable, and we're going to include all data collected in the Mississippi River Basin in our report for UNEP. And so all of this data is really important, and these are some suggested protocols. They're not required, but they are suggested to kind of help maintain the scientific rigor of the data that we're collecting. So the first is litter on land. So I'm actually going to flip over to our live sampling map so you guys can see this. So basically what we've done is we've identified areas, urban areas in St. Paul, one of our pilot cities, that are adjacent to the river. And then within that urban area, we've randomly selected some starting points for litter transects. So basically, again, this is a guide, not required. We've also added to that sampling area based on areas that people have told us that they're doing cleanups, or that they've told us that there is trash accumulation in those areas. So again, this is not required, but it is highly encouraged and will help us get a better distribution of what litter looks like throughout the city. And by focusing on this data in the communities, by focusing on this data collection, kind of where litter is coming from, very close to the source, it will really allow us to get a better understanding of where that litter is coming from, and to help us understand what interventions are possible. So let me make sure you guys can see my screen. There we go. All right, yeah, so these different points are the sampling area we've designated in that urban area along the river. All right. So as we get data in from these different sites, you'll see this map change live. We'll turn sites that already have enough data collection to a different color, so you'll know that there's already enough data collection in that area, with the goal of, again, getting that distribution of sites throughout the urban area so we can understand where litter is really coming from. So once you've selected one of these starting points or any other area within the basin, you can then survey a litter aggregation pathway. So that sounds fancy, but really all it is an area where litter typically accumulates. We call it areas where you might typically walk your dog. So along sidewalks, along pathways, along trails, roadsides, litter tends to typically accumulate in those spaces. You know, litter that's dropped from people's cars or on walks, those kind of things. So we're asking that you survey along that litter aggregation pathway within a section that is about 1 meter or 3 feet in length. So that's approximately the length from your outstretched fingertips to the center of your chest. So within that area, record all the litter items that you see as you follow that pathway. And do that for 30 minutes. So again, really not very complicated. The idea being pick a spot within the urban area, or if this doesn't apply to you, pick a spot within the basin generally. find one of these pathways where litter tends to accumulate, and then just record everything you see for at least 30 minutes. Again, you're welcome to do more, but by constraining this to a linear pathway that's about 1 meter in length, we'll be able to compare litter densities between different sites to be able to understand what's working and what's not in terms of preventing this litter from getting into the environment. Another focus area is floating debris. So also within those sampling maps, let me see if I can show you. All right, so also within the sampling maps, we have identified these observation points along the river upstream in the city and also downstream of those sites. So these observation sites, the idea being that you can go to these sites, stand along the edge of the river and just record what you see for 15 minutes, record what you see floating in the river. This sounds not very complicated, but it will be really important data to understanding how it's different between what we're seeing on the ground and between what we're seeing floating in the river. So again, this really will help us understand the connection to what litter is leaking out close to the source and then what litter we're seeing floating in the river. And then finally, we have accumulation sites. So I want to emphasize that the sampling method of tracking along a linear transect for 30 minutes is not exclusive to accumulation sites. You can do that in areas where there is a lot of litter, but we realize for group cleanups, for areas where there happens to be really high quantities of litter, that can be challenging. So for accumulation sites, we talked about some of the options earlier for logging litter kind of in bulk. And while that doesn't give the same geospatial granularity, while we're not able to say individual points and look at things like land use or access to waste bins or presence of stores that might influence that point specific litter, it's still really valuable data. I wanted to show this example as one example. So this is a tiny island off the coast of Belize where they've been logging this kind of bulk data along their coastline. And while we can't see that individual granularity of where each point is, we can identify major trends. So this is still really valuable data. So in this case, the major trend being that there's a lot of plastic fragments that are washing up on their coast. So accumulation sites, if you can't log that point specific data along that transect, the data still is really valuable and important for us as part of this initiative to understand what plastic pollution looks like in the Mississippi River Basin. And then I finally wanted to flag that all of these safety pointers are also in the debris tracker field guide. And I wanted to emphasize that while we certainly would love people to collect litter, to actually pick up litter if they can, and if they feel comfortable, it's not a requirement. So we're definitely not requiring anyone to pick up litter. If you don't feel comfortable with it, you do not have to pick up litter to submit data in the debris tracker app or to be part of this initiative. Safety is certainly the #1 priority. So this, again, I wanted to emphasize that all data collection is really important along the river. This is the data collection that happened along the river in debris tracker in 2020. So you can see it's really sparse. So having this upstream data is really important, and any data you collect will be more data than we have right now. So we're really excited to get this data in, and I'll finally flip to my last slide. And this is our social media handle as well as our debris tracker email address. So in addition to the Q&A session we'll have there, we're happy to answer any questions on social media or on our email address. Alrighty.
Thanks, Catherine. That was great. So a few questions coming through. I've been typing in the question and answer box, but I think one question that's come up, and I actually don't know for sure if we've updated the field guide with those maps yet. I know they're kind of hot off the press, but people are wanting to look at the sampling maps already. Are those links active yet?
They're not active yet, but they will be up by the end of the week. We will have the links live in the field guide. So we're working on, we got a lot of feedback from organizations of other sites beyond the urban areas. So we're working on adding those areas to the sampling maps, and we hope to have them live by the end of the week. So you can find those, they'll be available on the field guide.
Okay, so I just dropped the link to the field guide in the chat for everybody, to all panelists and attendees. So that field guide, it is a PDF, but right now we'll be updating that by Friday with those maps. And I don't know if we specified, but I've had a couple questions of, have all urban centers along the river been identified? You know, this is a pilot project, and the first 3 cities that have agreed to participate are Baton Rouge, St. Louis, and St. Paul. So the urban areas close to the river have been identified in those 3 cities, but I think, Catherine, you did a good job of saying this. Anywhere within the basin, if that data is collected in our time window, which I don't know if we specified that time window, is April 1st through April 25th. So any data collected between April 1st and April 25th will be compiled as a part of this project. Now, if you collect data outside of those time windows, that's okay. It's still beneficial to the entire citizen science program of Debris Tracker. You saw Catherine posting pictures of, you know, Tobacco Cay outside of, you know, there's people tracking all over the world all the time, but just for like the report to the mayors and the United Nations, we have to, you know, have a time frame that we actually take that data and compile it. Let's see, there's now a bunch more questions. So, oh, I know this one, Catherine. So the project function, I know you went over that. So like the Rotary Club is wondering, is the project function, would that allow them to aggregate their data if they wanted to set up a project just for the Rotarians?
Exactly. Yep. You could create a project just for Rotary. You could create a project for individual Rotary chapters if you wanted to do that. It's just another way to be able to divide and aggregate that data within the MRCTI list.
Great. Okay. So Brian wants to know, if there's trash receptacles in close proximity, should we label that? I don't think those are in the well, go ahead. Are those in the MRCTI list?
Currently, no, we haven't explored adding those, but it's a good idea, and we have done that before. So we could certainly explore adding trash receptacles to that as well.
Okay. We have a question about the Missouri River. I don't, you know, we basically can geofence, you know, is this project only specific to the Mississippi? Can we do the Missouri River as a part of the overall watershed? I think as I said, any data that's within that, if we're draining 40% of the US, it means sort of any data that's in that watershed during this project time period, we can pull that data from the database and talk about that. So I think definitely as a major tributary, and, you know, seeing that there's a confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi right there in St. Louis, that would be beneficial data for sure.
And I see the next question on filling out the survey. So the survey is not required, but it is highly encouraged. It's definitely really useful data to be able to collect. We might require a couple of the questions, in particular, the number of volunteers and the amount of time spent, because that allows us to kind of normalize how much data we're getting in by effort in terms of time and number of volunteers. But you won't be required to answer every question. Like, you don't have to put in additional observations about litter on everything you submit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some of them, if we don't have some of that information, we may not be able to use it the same for some of the scientific analyses. So I've had a couple of questions, Catherine, about the app release date. You may have mentioned that, but can we remind them? I know it's because of approvals within the App Store, it's kind of a squishy time frame, but it's about when?
Yeah, I anticipate having it live next week, available in the App Store, but we'll certainly have it live before this project starts, so at the beginning of April, but I anticipate it coming a little sooner than that. So definitely, if you want updates, stay tuned on our social media channel, and we'll be keeping everybody updated as it comes out.
Great. Let's see, the answer that live. In terms of math, so there's a question, if there's a cleanup project and we accumulate like a dumpster or something, should we include these items in numbers or bushels or some other measure, excuse me. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, we currently are really asking people to log the specific items for this initiative in particular. I know it is a lot of extra work, and we certainly realize that, and but it is really valuable data to have the specific items that are being collected. It's really hard to take bushels and pounds of items back to, you know, specific businesses that we should bring into the conversation on plastic pollution, or, you know, target specific items for intervention. So if you can make an exception just for this one project and record the specific items that you're seeing, that would be awesome. I think we can potentially look at a way to also record pounds of litter. That's a good idea if people are collecting that information.
How about this? This is a survey question. If there's a group with multiple devices working in an area, would you answer the survey with the number of people working per device?
Yes, that is correct. That's a great question. And yeah, so the number of volunteers question is specifically for the number of people who helped collect the data set that you're submitting. I also saw a question on a group account that I wanted to answer live, just to make sure everybody knows.
I typed an answer to that. I typed an answer, but you can go ahead and add to it.
No. I just think it's a good question, and it's important to make sure everybody knows that. So if you are working with kids and you want to make sure, so legally you have to be 13 to use the app. However, you can create a group account. So that's the same as creating a regular account. You can also do that if you don't want your users to have to sign up for accounts individually. If you want to create a group account for your organization, that's also an option. So it's the same as creating a regular account, but there's no limit to the amount of people who can log in under one account name. So that's another great way to aggregate data.
So the question, the marine debris tracker in the App Store right now, it says is not the correct app to use. It is, but there will be, how do you want to explain the update?
Yeah, if you download the app right now, in about a week or two, you will get a prompt to update that app, and it will update to the version you just saw. So it's the same app, it's just going to look a little bit different. Same app, going to the same database. You're welcome to start tracking whenever you want, but we just wanted to give you guys a preview of what the app will actually look like during this initiative.
Okay. Okay, I think this is all the questions for right now. Ed, please stay safe. He's had to go somewhere for severe weather in Minnesota, so I hope everyone is able to stay safe there. And don't worry, this will be recording, and we will re-answer your question again. He had asked about the project function before the end, or we'll get in touch with you directly to make sure you know that you can make a project for the Rotarians. So. Okay, I'm thinking that we'll have time for more questions at the end because they're sort of popping up, and Catherine actually can type answers while I'm going to talk now. We're going to switch gears to kind of, each of these training webinars is going to have another section on sort of other topics. Every other one is going to focus on a local community group or NGO or issue, very much more local to the Mississippi River and the communities we're working in. This was a bit, this one we planned pretty short notice and wanted to give sort of this bigger picture of plastic pollution and other places where this kind of work has been applied for some hopefully some inspiration and information sharing amongst different places around the world. So I'm gonna share my screen here briefly. Just for a few minutes. And just some information on why are we talking about and studying plastic pollution. You know, this is a extremely useful material. We all use it every day. One activity I do with my students could be done with any school grade or anyone just for awareness is keep track of everything that you touch in a day that's plastic. Even if you count only the one item one time that you touch it, it's actually a really large number, and just kind of realizing how useful this material is. But then at the same time, how this has grown in our lives. So from 2 million tons in 1950 to a cumulative 8.3 billion metric tons in 2017, a number we can't even imagine. You know, it's 80 million blue whales, but yet, you know, we can't imagine that. But a lot of it is used for packaging. So if you do that little assessment, you'll see how much is it that is packaging and things that you need to throw away right away after you utilize them. So we've created 6.3 billion metric tons of waste as of 2015. And sort of what has happened to that waste? Well, we've only been able to recycle 9% of it. Plastic is so useful because it's so variable. It can be film, it can be soft, it can be rigid, it can be any color of the rainbow. And that actually makes it really hard to manage in the waste stream and recycle. So about 79% of it, we estimate through our research, has ended up either in landfills or our natural environment. So in 2015, we estimated how much of that plastic was actually reaching our oceans every year. And we made that estimate to be about 8 million metric tons. And that, again, is a hard number to visualize, but it's equal to about a dump truck of plastic reaching our oceans every minute. And this graphic shows where we've made those estimates from the land all around the world. The pink circles here are actually floating plastic samples that have been found on the ocean surface. This graphic is from National Geographic's June 2018 issue. And then and basically, really everywhere we look, we find it. So collaborators of ours have analyzed samples from the top of Mount Everest where they found microplastic. They found plastic at the bottom of the ocean in the Marianas Trench. And so, you know, it's really everywhere we look. And this is only what's been found on the surface of the ocean. The yellow here is what's estimated to be coming from rivers all around the world. So they're really the connectors of our land to the ocean. And while they do provide conduit, they also are sort of reservoirs. As you can imagine, some of the plastic makes it all the way out the river and some of it doesn't. And that's one of the things we'll be investigating on this for this project. And so I wanted to talk about that 8 million metric tons and new estimates that have come out. This is led by Dr. Borrell and was a working group of people from all over the world. And looking at, even though when we heard that 8 million metric tons, we took a lot of action, but even with some of those actions, by 2030, it's estimated that that number would increase to 20 to 53 million metric tons, reaching all of our waterways around the world, so all of our aquatic systems. So looking at being more aggressive, we need to be more aggressive with what we're doing, not only reducing the waste that we generate, increasing waste management around the world, but then cleanup and recovery as well. So not only just what we're doing for this project, but further upstream, thinking about how we can prevent the plastic from entering our environment in the first place. So leading to that, thinking about our context in the US, we actually are the largest generator of plastic waste in the world, not only together as a country, but on a per person level. So even a small bit that's either littered or legally dumped adds up to quite a large quantity, ending up what we call mismanaged. And then historically, we've exported a lot of our plastic scrap meant for recycling to other countries. And there, that material might be mismanaged as well. And that means we could rank as high as third for plastic that could be in our coastal areas and entering our ocean around the world. And so thinking about how we can reduce this, we really want to kind of look at the whole value chain for plastic, and as far upstream as reducing the quantity that we use or that we even produce to be used in the first place is one way to make this reduction. Other ways might be, how can we get materials and goods to people without producing waste in the first place? So a lot of innovation in that space around reusable goods. Other materials, what other materials can we use? People are looking at biodegradable polymers, other materials that we've used historically, like metal, and then looking at how can we, reduce the waste that we generate. Are there individual choices that can be made? Are there systems that can be changed? So we have a variety of choices as citizens and community members, and then improving our waste management infrastructure. But what we're doing now is what we kind of call a last chance capture in this, in that, when you're doing a cleanup, you're just getting that before that waste ends up in our waterway or in our ocean. And that's really important. But one thing that I want to stress here is that collecting the data on that, because the whole reason is then we can hopefully take these upstream interventions, we can learn what's happening on why it's ending up there, and then we can prevent that, because we'd like to not ever have to do, the cleanup. But, and so really data is sort of the key to unlocking the potential of making that change. And I wanted to give a couple examples of folks who have used data collection to make change at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center. They designed their whole citizen science and community engagement program with the tracker, and have looked at sea turtle nesting sites and litter there. Also, different cities and states have collected data on plastic bags, for example, ending up in the environment, to look at potential for plastic bag taxes and fees. And then this kind of data collection is being applied in a sea to source expedition along the Ganges River, which you're going to hear Taylor Madeline talk about later on. But right now, I want to pass it over to a PhD candidate in my group, Amy Brooks, who's going to talk about how we use this kind of data collection in our community-based research around the world.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Dr. Jambeck. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Catherine, it looks like the screen sharing is disabled on my end. Brief technical difficulty. I don't know if that's it.
Try it again.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen. So again, my name is Amy Brooks. I'm a PhD candidate in Dr. Jambeck's lab at the University of Georgia. And I'm going to be telling you all about a tool we've been developing on our lab that helps to turn data, much like the data that's going to be collected throughout the Mississippi, into useful knowledge that can inform interventions upstream, and was actually some of the framework for how the sampling methods being used in this project were developed. So the tool is called the CAP, which stands for the Circularity Assessment Protocol. It's a hub and spoke model that helps us learn how plastic moves through a community so that we can identify best practices or challenges, or basically provide an evidence-based way to better manage community waste. So I'm going to be telling you about these spokes on the outside of the circle here, just kind of what they mean, what data we're looking at, what kind of information we're collecting for them. So the first spoke is input. So here we're wanting to learn what products are coming into the community and where do they come from. But this is generally kind of hard to get information. So what we've been doing is actually conducting surveys in stores. So we're documenting product types, packaging information, and that sort of thing. And this can help us create a snapshot of what consumers in the community are buying and using. The next spoke is community. So this spoke is actually looking to illuminate what kind of understanding and perception the community has around plastics or materials and waste in general. So for our purposes, this comes from looking at policies, media presence, whether that's social media or otherwise, as well as education events and campaigns, including cleanup events. In the past, we've also included community workshops and household surveys to have closer conversations with community members themselves. And so this spoke is important for helping us understand really what people's awareness and education is around waste management and plastic pollution. The next spoke is material and product design. So with this spoke, we're wanting to understand what sort of alternative or innovative formats that products might be coming in, specifically plastic packaging or alternatives to packaging that might help reduce plastic waste generation. So this could be reusable bags, reusable bottles, or innovative product designs that help to make products more easily recyclable and less likely to end up in the environment. So this can help us discover best practices that are occurring in a community that might be shared or even scaled. The next spoke is the use spoke. So with this, we're wanting to understand how communities and consumers within communities are acquiring their goods. So really how they're interacting with them, how they're using them and reusing them. So this could be in the form of looking at a take back scheme or a deposit scheme, or maybe a refillable beverage station. And another example is bulk stores. So giving customers the option to use their own containers for getting the product, or just being able to buy more product with less packaging. So this lets us see how products are delivered to consumers and can be helpful for letting us identify, again, innovative practices that might be highlighted or shared or scaled across communities. So now on the more waste management side, the next spoke is collection, and this is exactly what it sounds like. So we are, with this one, aiming to understand how waste is collected in communities. This could be curbside collection, like what you might see at home, as well as public receptacles, and that sort of thing. So this lets us know if the waste is being generated in the community, whether that's homes or businesses or just anywhere throughout the community, is being captured for management, which leads us to end of life. So this is our second to last spoke. Here we are exploring the ultimate fate of waste after it's collected. So for one, we might look and see if the community has a solid waste management plan in place. Do they have a plan for how they're going to manage waste? Then we might look at the overall amount of waste that's being generated, typically in a per capita waste management rate. And then what exactly is the waste stream comprised of? Is how much of it is plastic, for instance? And then lastly, this could be looking at landfills, open dumps, recycling facilities, etc. So we're, with this, hoping to find out how much waste is generated and where it's being treated in relation to the community. And lastly, our leakage spoke, tying it all together with some of the topics that Jenna and Catherine were speaking about earlier. So this is where we can harness the power of the debris tracker and really try to document exactly what we're seeing on the ground, so we can see what kind of items or waste or product types are leaking out of the waste management system and into the environment. So this helps us with measuring and monitoring litter for informing those solutions. And for our purposes, we have developed a surveying method that systematically looks at how we might collect representative samples in a community. It's a bit sciencey sounding, but we essentially create a grid over a map of the community, and we can randomly select areas to go to physically to run our surveys. And this has helped us develop the strategy that we're using in this citizen science sampling for this project. So once we go to those areas, we conduct the survey methods, including running 100-meter-long transects in which we document and record the litter items that we see. And then this data, it can be pulled into geospatial analysis software, and we can figure out things like how much litter is in a certain area, and we can compare it between areas and over time. So that was kind of a quick and dirty overview of the CAP. This tool has given us the privilege of working with communities all over the world. And before 2020, our team spent a good portion of time traveling and running these field surveys in communities to refine and apply our methods. But as you can imagine, with so much reliance on collecting data on the ground, the past year has really forced us to reassess and adapt our methods so that we can keep collecting this valuable data and knowledge. So how have we gone about this during COVID? We've actually started working even more closely with communities. So we've been able to identify and train local implementation partners and hold virtual training sessions, much like this one, to help people on the ground conduct full field work. And we've had great success so far. So in fact, we have actually collected data with community collaboration in 10 countries and 26 cities so far, and we have many more to come. But ultimately, with the CAP, we are able to facilitate information sharing between decision makers, community members, experts, etc., to harness the power of interdisciplinary and local knowledge so that we can create rich data sets and shed light on community circularity and management of waste. And this helps us to empower communities to I apologize for that. I have to connect via my phone and it cut out for some reason. But I'll just quickly wrap up and pass the virtual mic over to Taylor Madeline, who's going to be telling you about one of our recent exciting applications of the CAP during the National Geographic Sea to Source expedition along the Ganges River. So thank you, and sorry again about that technical difficulty there at the end.
Thanks, Amy.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. I'm Taylor Madeline. As Amy said, I'm also a fellow PhD student that's working with Dr. Jenna Jambeck and the team here at University of Georgia. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of our Sea to Source expedition in the Ganges, where we applied a lot of the methodology that's going to be used in the Mississippi River Basin, as well as the full CAP work that Amy just explained. And let me share my screen quickly so you all can see my deck, hopefully. Come on. Great. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. So in 2019, National Geographic, along with partners such as the University of Georgia, the Wildlife Institute of India, and Wild Team in Bangladesh, set out to run an expedition along the Ganges River to characterize the composition, flow, and load of waste within a river system. And it was really a novel and holistic way to look at a full river system and understand how waste is moving through the system and how much is actually contributing to ocean plastic waste. And you'll see here we had an extremely interdisciplinary mix and an international mix. We had scientists, social scientists, engineers, ecologists, anthropologists from all over the world, including Bangladesh, India, the UK, the US, and Canada. As you can see from this photo, clearly we had a slight gender bias. This was actually the largest female-led expedition that National Geographic had ever run. And this is also very near and dear to my heart because this expedition is actually how I came to meet Dr. Jambeck. She was one of our scientific co-leads, and I was the director of the Plastics Initiative at National Geographic at the time. And also Catherine and Amy were on the expedition as well.
Hey, Taylor, we can see your notes for some reason. Your both screens are like layered.
Is it gone now?
It's gone now. Yep. It wasn't when you first started, and then all of a sudden it came in, and then anyway,
this is what I get for using two screens. Thank you for letting me know.
Of course.
Apologies for that. So this is the map of the entire route that we went. So we actually started down on the southeastern portion of the map in the Bay of Bengal, and spent several weeks on a boat going through that portion of the river, and then continued up all the way up to the headwaters of the river that is up in the glaciers of the Himalaya, just north of Harshil. And we traveled over 2,700 kilometers for the full length of the expedition. And we actually conducted the expedition twice in 2019, pre and post monsoon season, so that we could also capture the seasonal variation in the transport of waste throughout the river system. You've probably heard of plane, trains, and automobiles expeditions. This was really sort of a boats, trains, and tuk-tuks expedition. We had an incredible adventure taking all different modes of transportation up the river twice in the year. And it provided an amazing opportunity to stop at these different communities and conduct the work that Amy mentioned, along with some other work. And we also we made best efforts along the expedition to reduce and at the very least track our plastic footprint as a team as well. So we really tried to be conscious of the footprint that we were leaving and reduce that as much as possible. And essentially there were sort of three big groupings of scientific teams that were on the expedition. And we traveled together, and then at every site we would sort of simultaneously conduct our research. But they were all very complementary and had areas of overlap. And those three teams were environment, city, and community. So here you see one of our team members from the environment team, and essentially what they were looking at was plastic type and amount in sediment samples, air samples, water samples, as well as opportunistic biological samples. So here you see the air samples being taken, and also the biological samples, which came largely from fish markets and through fishermen locally, but it actually turned into an opportunity to create essentially a risk assessment of potentially vulnerable species in the river basin that were particularly vulnerable to plastic pollution. And that included really iconic species such as the river dolphin in the Ganges. Let's see, of course, let's see, guys, go to the next one. There it goes. Another part of the environmental team was also surveying for fishing nets that they saw along the banks of the river, and trying to quantify exactly what the contribution of the fishing sort of industry and the waste that gets generated from that at large to plastic pollution in the river. This is something that we often hear associated with oceanic plastic, but not something that we see, or at least that has been quantified very much when it comes to river-borne plastic waste. So the second team was our social team, and they interviewed over 1,400 people in total, and essentially what they would do is conduct both focus group conversations and household surveys to understand the perceptions and use of plastic within the community itself. And this was largely led by our team, one of our partners that's based in the UK through the Zoological Society of London. And they have implemented this sort of work in other places around the world to really understand the social and behavioral aspects of plastic waste generation. And last but certainly not least, we had our land team that were carrying out the circularity assessment protocol that Amy mentioned in her presentation at each of the 11 sites along the river. So that included both litter transects that you see up there in the top left, as well as store and food vendor surveys to understand what the top products were and what the top materials were, where they were coming from, and also visiting things like waste management sites, informal and formal, as well as the recycling supply chain locally and otherwise. And all in all, they surveyed over 130 shops and collected over 1,300 products from the surveys. One of the things that we sort of did across all of the teams, and something that is extremely important in all of the work that we do, is community engagement. And we ran sort of workshops. So there were a couple different ones. We would have solution-based workshops, which on our second time around focused on some of our findings from the first expedition. We ran marine debris tracker workshops, so teaching different community leaders, different school groups, different stakeholders how to use the marine debris tracker app to collect this data in their own communities. And really this was sort of mobilizing community scientists in a way that's very similar to what's going to be happening in the Mississippi River Basin, which we're very excited about. And it's also very similar to the work being done in the Mississippi, because ultimately we want all of this data to be for the community members. You know, it is intended to be as actionable and and as useful as possible to inform positive change. And so putting that power, that knowledge, that data collection in the hands of the people that have that power to make that positive change is really important. We already have some really exciting findings that are coming out of the expedition. One of them is that we have there's an estimated 1.3 billion microplastics per day that could be discharged into the Bay of Bengal from the Ganges River. This was from our water-based and environment team. The same environment team also found that fishing gear is indeed a significant source of plastic pollution, and we just had a peer-reviewed publication come out that sort of explains the quantity of that waste. And there's also a team that is working on a project that would essentially upcycle that discarded fishing net into carpet tiles and create local economies for that waste. From the social work, there's been some really interesting analysis that's ongoing in terms of the constraints and the uses around single-use plastic, particularly for females and for women groups that were in India and Bangladesh. This work is ongoing. We should have some exciting work coming out soon. One of the other components of the expedition was that we had some really wonderful, innovative technology that was deployed, including these bottle tags that you see here, which essentially help us track the movement of plastic litter throughout the river. And as you'll see on some of these maps, ultimately into the Bay of Bengal. And the exciting thing about this, we just had a peer-reviewed paper come out on this, is that it's completely open source. So this type of technology can be deployed anywhere in the world to look at a river system and understand if you drop a plastic bottle or any piece of plastic waste in this watershed or in this specific area, where is it going to end up? And the next two slides will look very familiar because this is what we've been talking about on this presentation, and also what will be some of what will be done in the Mississippi. But the land team collected I think over 15,000 meters worth of transects for litter data. And they documented over 85,000 litter items throughout the expedition. And this is essentially a zoomed in version of the world map that Catherine showed you all, showing the expedition location and the spots of marine debris tracker data where we collected litter data. And again, this is all open source and available, so you could go onto the Marine Debris Tracker website now and zoom into this area for the expedition in allotted time. And you could see the different types of litter that were collected. And we should have another peer-reviewed paper coming out soon that characterizes some of that litter and provides some really interesting recommendations. So last but not least, we do have some products that have already come out of the expedition. And like I said, we have a lot of ongoing scientific publications that are coming out. And I think Jenna is going to share a link in the chat to this, but the methods that were conducted on this expedition, which are all, hopefully this was communicated, but it was all really complementary and really gave a wonderful holistic view of the watershed and the river and its contribution to plastic waste. And it complements also very nicely the work that's being done in the Mississippi in terms of marine debris tracker and citizen science engagement and quantifying the litter items that we see on the ground. So all of these resources are free and open and available. So if you know a researcher that would be interested in doing some of this complementary work, that's certainly a possibility. And I just wanted to finish by saying that I hope that this was sort of an exciting look at how some of this work can be translated into a river system in a really positive way. And we're seeing already some really positive change and some excitement that's coming out of this data because it is so actionable and so concrete. And we're so excited to be able to take even some of this work over to the Mississippi and to get you all started on using Marine Debris Tracker. So I will pass it back to Catherine and Jenna for Q&A.
Thank you, Jenna, Amy, and Taylor for that context on why this data collection effort is really important and innovative in this view of a river system, and how this also plays in with this bigger picture of studying plastic pollution in communities and in river systems around the world. We are actually already a little bit over time, so I'm going to drop my email in the chat if anyone has any additional questions, but I can stick around for a minute, and hopefully some of our other panelists will as well if anyone has any additional questions to ask. I wanted to emphasize again that we're really grateful for our local partners, as well as the leadership from MRCTI, UNEP, and National Geographic. We couldn't collect this amount of data at this scale without the involvement of community members. This would be impossible for researchers to collect on our own. So this is a really exciting effort to be able to gather this much data. And we also do have more webinars coming soon. If you want to stay tuned to our social media channels, as well as to UNEP's Mississippi page, you'll see more information on upcoming training sessions if we didn't get to your questions here. And then this is just the beginning of work in the Mississippi River. So we're hoping that this will lead to future efforts, not only to collect more data, but also to create more solutions in the Mississippi River Basin. So thank you all for your time. And if you do have more questions, we'll stick around for another minute.
I'll just echo Catherine's thanks to everybody and share a little bit of my personal story in that I'm not from Georgia, so I live in Georgia now, but I grew up in Pine City, Minnesota, along the Snake River, which is a tributary to the St. Croix River, which eventually leads to the Mississippi. So this project is especially just sort of near and dear to my heart, and still go back to Minnesota every summer for time, and I'm living on the rivers there. So just really happy that we can collaborate and bring so many people together to work to protect our rivers and waterways. Did you get some more? Are you getting some more questions?
There are a few I am answering in the chat. Got a question about the link to the video. I can definitely share that. That is on our Debris Tracker YouTube channel, which is also where all of this, all of these webinars that we do record in the future will be posted as well.
And it's also on the UNEP page. So all of the whole plastic pollution initiative, like homepage, is this unep.org/Mississippi. So we kind of gave you direct links to a lot of the resources, but in terms of, if you can just remember unep.org/Mississippi, which I just put in the, oh, I didn't do it to everybody, sorry. There we go. I just put in the chat to everybody, unep.org/Mississippi. There's links to all of these things that will kind of guide you through the multiple information sources as well. So the video is there. And this video will be posted on the Debris Tracker YouTube channel as soon as we pull it off, and we can maybe edit out some of the spaces there. All right.
Alrighty. I think if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and call it, but you all have my contact info and know where to reach us on social media. So do feel free to reach out with any questions.
I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.